Hello, good morning, welcome. This is International Flavor. I happen to be Samuel Trapp, coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Feel free to phone in 573-746-8020, and I might even answer the call. I suppose the big news, the biggest news, by the way, today is Wednesday. You know what that means? That means this is the greatest, largest day in radio history on damradio.com/live. You can come here and listen up all the time to the wonderful shows on this channel. And there's tons of good music, too, when we're not here. And so you can also go back and listen to all the shows at damradio.com/podcast. My particular show, International Flavor, you can go to internationalflavor.com and listen up. You can email me at samuelt@internationalflavor.com should you feel the desire. And sometimes I even read my email. Some people say that I don't, but they're wrong. I do. So Trumpster, the old Trumpster, gave a speech last night that was, I hear, the longest State of the Union address in history. He's always doing things hugely, huge. It is huge, and we get to do it. And people are coming unglued. They're coming apart at the seams all over the world. Everybody's crying about something from his speech. I heard it. I didn't hear anything crazy. There wasn't lunacy in his voice. There's, the only things I object to on the old Trumpster, he tends to beat up on people, but, that's the way it is. Elections have consequences, do they not? He gave you're saying that the Obama monster didn't do the exact same thing? I believe he did. And so I'm thinking that it was a pretty good speech, all in all. He gave the State of the Union. Do you agree with it all? No, of course not. But you should agree? I shouldn't say what you should. You can believe whatever the hell you want. That's the beauty of America. But for me, most of that I was in agreement with. Some of it I think is what they call. So in law school, you go through contracts. And in contracts, there's a thing called puffery. So you engage in puffery when, and the greatest example, of course, is the used car salesman. And the example, at least my professor in law school would always give about this would be, okay, so the used car salesman says, this car was owned by a little old lady. All she used, she got in the car every day, and she went from her house to the grocery store. So this car is owned by a little old lady. Now, are you ever going to have to prove that car was owned by a little old lady who only drove it from her house down to the old mini mart every day to pick up a new bottle of wine and, a couple of boxes of crackers with some salami and cheese? Obviously, I have some salami and cheese on the brain because I really like that. That's a good snack. Maybe we should take a break. I'll put it on pause, run to the local grocery store in my truck that used to be owned by a little old lady, and use it for the exact same purpose. Nope, that's not what I will do. I'm already here. But puffery is just advertising your brand, basically. Saying the things that you think are important that people would like to hear about the brand. So the State of the Union always has a bunch of that because obviously the interpretation of the State of the Union, some people will say, because Trump said something that was actually, this part kind of is music to my ears, where he says 0 people have been allowed in the country just crossing the border, and here's your illegal aliens. Don't just have a wide open gate to come running in and support the Democratic Party and get free health care, sign up to get them some Social Security because they're disabled, and start getting benefits. That's, a very good percentage of them are coming here for that. Now, is there also a good percentage that are coming here for the American dream and to work because they can work and send money back home to their families? And the United States is supposed to be the melting pot, and the United States gives these benefits, and a lot of them come here and extremely productive. One side will focus on the productive people. The other side will focus on the criminal. And there's plenty of both, okay? And so when you hear things like, no illegal aliens, well, you know what? I'm all for that. I think the gate should be open. The gate should be open. We should allow people in, according to specific rules, because you want to move to, Russia, you have to follow the rules. And you have to get in according to their rules. You have to be a productive member. You don't just get to go over there and start getting free stuff unless you're Ukrainian headed into Germany or Poland or anywhere in Europe. You get free crap. The same in America, by the way. You come over, you fly over, you claim that, geez, I had to run from Ukraine because there's a war there. By the way, who started that? And then you get Social Security for a period of time. I was paying guys to work for me, day rate, that I would say, I only need you a few days. We got to do some work, and I'm paying $250 a day, $250 to them a day. Meanwhile, they're pulling $2,000 from the government every month. The U.S. government, they're getting $2,000. They got a food stamp card that they're pretty proud of. Look, I got this card. They get free residence to live in a building. They get housing for free. And what the hell are they paying for? And so you get no rent, free food, and a stipend of whatever it is from Social Security. The average rate. I don't get any yet. I'm not that old, but it's coming. And I keep getting these statements that tell me what I'm gonna get from my work. And the old Trumpster says that that's going to be tax free for our seniors. I wonder if it's tax free for the Ukrainians that come over and get it for free. By the way, I'm not against Ukrainians coming over and getting it for free. We started the West pushed war over there, along with a lot of Ukrainians, pushed for war for the last 30 years against Russia. And that's where we are today. So, if we force it, why shouldn't they be able to come over here and get free stuff? I don't agree with it. Go to Europe. Europe believes in free stuff. Go over there and get your free stuff. Somebody told me one time when I was in Austria, so I'm Austrian by heritage. I'm part of the Von Trapps, and 100 years ago, my mom knows the story exactly. But the uncle or some relative of Captain Von Trapps came to the United States before Von Trapp did, and we descend from that. Dropped the Von, and now we're just plain old ordinary Trapp. No royalty for us, except for one certain brother who thinks he's better than everyone else, and gets to upgrade himself to Von Trapp. And gee, look how important I am. And that's not what I feel, nor do the rest of my brothers and sisters, although certainly we are descendant from them. But somebody told me that when I was gone over there, if it's Austria, and by the way, on my mother's side, they're all from the Bonn, Germany area, and Leinberger, very, very German name. And I've been over there, toured all over the places over there, but I spent a lot of time in Austria. I went to the Von Trapp family mansion several times in history, once in the 90s, once in the 2000s, in the teens, and then once in the 20s. And I love it over there. It's a beautiful country, beautiful everything. One of the times I was there, they said if I came to Austria, because there's Austrian heritage in my background, I could become an Austrian citizen easier than most because I can prove my descendancy from, the Von Trapps. And so I could go over there and get free stuff. I'd get a retirement from these guys. And I was like, well, that's cool. Austria is a fantastic country. I like it. It's beautiful. A lot of Europe is beautiful. And, that's where a lot of heritage from America comes from, is Central, Eastern, all over Europe. And so, there's some beautiful stuff over there. But I don't believe in free stuff but Europe does. And I believe here in the United States, I've paid into the damn system for forever. I want my tax freeze that old Trumpster is promising. I like that. I'm not against it. So there's plenty of stuff to go over on that. But a lot of people on the other side of the planet are bitching about the speeches from yesterday. I mean, I'm not. I thought it was pretty reasonable. I got a couple of clips I'd like to cover for you. But the crying immediately from your legacy media types getting out there, they're all crying. I should share the crying part, and it's not crying, but it's been, oh, Jesus, highly partisan, and here he went, and he's saying bad things, and he hates aliens. That's obvious. And, and he hates Democrats. You told me Democrats didn't do the exact same thing under Obama, and the Republicans didn't stand up when Biden was giving a speech. Nobody stood up when that guy was mumbling through his cue cards. At least on the Republican side. And that's speaking from a guy who usually watches the State of the Union. Usually, watching the advertising brand from either side is really all this is. You get to advertise and talk about how positive it is under your rule, your leadership, your dictatorship, your method of running the country. And, the Democrats say one thing, the Republicans say another. And so I want to share with you just a tad from this. I have an 8-minute clip and I got a 2-minute clip here. And I'm thinking that I would prefer to share the 2-minute clip. And then Kaya Collis I got something from her too. She's a lunatic. And, she's not a lunatic. I shouldn't say that. She hasn't been diagnosed that I'm aware of. But listening to her is an exercise. Let's put it that way. And it's, how come I can't find my history? Why am I having such troubles today? Because I just am. Where's my history? Your account, your data. Where is your freaking history? Samuel, let us go in Sam's history. No. Well, I thought I had it all jazzed up and ready to go, and I just don't. History, playlist, liked videos. And I hate babbling like that. Drives me crazy. Let us begin at the beginning, and here come the highlights from the old Trumpster. Beginning at the beginning, so long as I have the cue card queued up. We'll stop him along the way for commentary.
All Democrats, every single one of them, voted against these really important and very necessary, massive tax cuts.
He's talking about the seniors and tips and all that stuff, and none of them.
They wanted large-scale tax increases to hurt the people instead.
And as soon as they're back in charge, that's exactly what they'll do.
But we held strong, and with the great, big, beautiful bill,
I'm against most of the great, big, beautiful bill, but I absolutely believe with the tax cuts. You got to see Chuck Schumer here. He's all depressed. He's got this grin. Well, what do you call it? What do you call a horror grin? Grin of horror.
Gave you no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors.
Time to stand up. All Republicans and the Democrats just sit there with their thumbs inserted. But even the generals didn't stand up. They can't be political Supreme Court justices. Nope, they're sitting all in a little club group.
And we also made interest on auto loans tax deductible.
Now that's interesting. That's cool.
But only if the car is made in America.
Oh, no, I own a Toyota. That's not true. But some Toyotas are made in America.
Recently in Pennsylvania, I met Megan Hemhauser.
Yeah, I don't need to hear these gratification things. I don't really care about that. That clip I didn't like. I think it was at about the 2-minute mark I wanted to go. standing up again, cheering for somebody. So there was a lot of cheering. He had the Olympic
Megan,
team.
Please stand up. We're fighting for you.
And
Megan.
Megan's being fought for. That's great. She's already standing because she didn't even get a seat. She's that important. No seat for you.
Thank you, Megan. We're fighting for you, Megan.
That's true.
Under our bill, parents like Megan can also activate their children's brand new Trump accounts.
Now, this is a good idea. I like this.
I did not name that.
So when my first grandchild was born, I went and got a whole life policy for that child because they're so cheap. And if you're looking for an interesting gift, something that will actually matter to a grandchild, tell you what, go get them a whole life insurance policy. I use Northwestern Mutual, but get it from one of the biggies. It's been around 100 years. And get a life insurance policy for that child in the amount of whatever you think, $25,000, $50,000. Since they're so young, it is extremely cheap. And all the money you send to it, so the way Whole Life works, if you're unaware, is Whole Life works where you pay the policy costs up front. Then what you can do, and what I did, is I paid for that policy for whatever, 10, 12 years, and the policy exists now for the rest of her life. And it has a cash value, and it grows. That cash value grows. Nothing huge. I never even look at it. It's I own it, but when she is of age, I plan to transfer it to her. And it's she'll get whatever the value is. It costs you the $25, $50 a month, whatever it costs that you send it in there. You just make it an automatic. It's money you forget about anyway. And it's a hell of a gift for a whole life insurance policy. I thought was a good gift. And it has cash value. It has all that stuff. And you can transfer it to them when they get older or just keep it, whatever. But they're insured for life. And it's accumulating value for life, and so the insurance policy, you don't have to put any money in it after a certain time because the insurance comes out first. The cost of the insurance for life comes out first, and they make their money. Trust me, the insurance company makes their money, and it continues to gain risk. But the biggest factor in your favor. If I go and buy a whole life insurance policy today that is the same amount as what her whole life policy cost when, same amount of insurance, so you got 100,000, 50,000, I want 100,000 insurance policy, I'd be paying out the rear end for that because of my age. But if I'd have bought one when I was one, I'd have had a policy that existed forever. So I think it's a good investment. And so if you're looking for a gift for a child, that is born, get them a whole life policy. It seems to work, and it's a good deal. And there you have it. Let's see. You know what? We're going to continue a little bit more of the Trumpster, and then I have something else for you.
Nobody believes me, but I did not name it. It was named by a very tall man sitting right there in the third row. Nice man, a good man. Tax-free investment accounts for every American child. This is something that's so special and has taken off and gone through the roof. Millions will be...
I had never heard of this Trump plan for children, but trust me, I'm looking into it now, because if they're getting in it anyway, all that stuff I just said to you about whole life might not be there. But this is all... It's one or the other. If Trump has designed it on that principle, which I really don't know, that would be pretty cool.
Pre-funded courtesy of the U.S. Treasury and private individuals like Michael and Susan Dell, who have donated $6.25 billion to fund the Trump accounts for 25 million American children.
That is freaking cool. True that. And I think that is awesome. That's a hell of a tax cut. Next time I get $6.5 billion, I'm going to donate it to somebody. A little pocket change, donations.
I asked Michael Dell, how do you make all that money? He said, well, I just sat on my dorm in school, and I made computers, and I'd sell them to people, and I just kept selling and selling and selling, and pretty...
Well, there you go. Yep, those are American stories. The American dream, folks, it is alive and well for the Dells and people who sit in their dorm room and create computers. Wish I was one of them geeks that, I was a geek anyway, but I didn't make computers. I was a a book nerd. You know, I was the book report dude. Anybody in school could come to me and I'd read every book, and they'd say, write me a book report, and I'd charge them $1 a page. I'd never upped it over the years, and I think that was my problem. Plus it was a limited business model. Where else are you going to do book reports for $1 a page? You kind of leave school and suddenly your whole business model evaporates. You got nothing. And so my first business was a failure. And I became a baler of hay for a period of time, riding on the back of a hay wagon, throwing up bales of hay that were larger than me because I was rather small in those days. Not that I'm big these days, but there you have it. And I'm sort of rambling today, and I want to get to my other topic. And I read to you my reports, my Civic Outlaws reports, and I spoke a little bit about our Sunshine Law requests yesterday, and I've done a little bit of research on my take. I give you my take on the overturning by the Supreme Court of the Chevron doctrine. Now, my take on it is I'm a strict constructionist, is what I am. I believe that power should reside in its proper lane, that's what the founders intended. This is what I intend. And I want to read to you a different point of view, because a lot of people say that the overturning of Chevron, trust me, this, and then the Missouri courts following up with that in statute 530, revised Missouri statute 536.140, they see that as a huge loss. It's an enormous loss for them, for these type of people that don't want, they want the growth of big government. Those people exist, and they exist everywhere. So when I am somewhat negative of some of the things that the old Trumpster, the government is doing, it's not because of Trump. It's not because of who. Well, sometimes it's because of who he is, because the way he addresses people and is always confrontational and somewhat rude. I really don't like that style. Okay, but you could argue the same thing about me. It's just more of a personality thing than anybody, because every time he does it, I lose interest in what he is saying. That's the problem for me, right? It's like every time he goes, like he just said, here's a guy who named the bill, and he's a very tall man sitting right there, and he's a great man. He's a great man. Well, Elon Musk used to be a great man, right? And then he became the Antichrist, right? And so it just, I don't like those sort of platitudes. I don't like those sort of attacks. I just am negative. People are people. Sometimes they do things that you love, and sometimes they do things that you don't. I appreciate all of it. They're people. People are wonderful. People are varied. People have different opinions. You don't have to agree with them to decide to dislike them. You don't have to dislike them because you disagree with them. You might try to convince them, but geez, everybody turns it into emotional trauma and they're destroyed for life. People's opinions are wonderful. And convincing people of something is one of the best things that you could engage in life. You know what I mean? And convincing them of your point of view instead of believing what they. And so that's what I like. I like convincing. I like talking. I like engaging, if at all possible. And I just wanted to, I don't know, say that I disapprove of that type of issue. So at any rate, here we go. There was a little bit more of the old Trumpster, but I think we're going to ignore that for now because I want to get to this Supreme Court thing. So I shared with you the case called Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo, in which the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron doctrine. And what that is deference. It means if a a statute is created, if a law is created by the legislature and signed by the executive branch through the president, then it becomes law, and it is unclear. Maybe there's a term in there that is unclear. Maybe they haven't been definitive enough to put something, I don't know, to create the right term in there. They haven't defined a term properly, and there are questions that the Supreme Court, after Chevron, which was 70s, 73, I can't remember, the Chevron was 40 years, just about 40 years, a little bit more, that the court would defer to the professional bureaucrat, right? Which I'm totally against, absolutely against that. And I fight that every day in Civic Outlaws. And in part, it's because of this, because for years, this is what they've allowed. And I think the bureaucrats need to go. And I've detailed quite a few things about what just one agency. We've gone into several, but then more are coming. But the focus has been alcohol tobacco control. And they are out of control. Alcohol tobacco control has turned into gaming machine control, has turned into cigarette machine control. Of course, that's in their lane, though. I'm okay with that. And has turned into regulation of what a woman can wear. And it's nonsense in a place that sells alcohol. And so they're carrying guns. These people are carrying guns to, I don't know, defend a liquor license. That we're like in 1930 when, there's a beer runner running, interstate beers, like Smokey and the Bandit, and they're picking it up in Texarkana because there's boys are thirsty in Atlanta, and they're running stuff. They're running illegal alcohol. That's not happening. That's not what, if they're after that and that's what these guys are doing, then fine. But that isn't what they're doing. It's not that way. We're not having gun and alcohol runners just because somebody happens to own a bar. So they go into bars that they disapprove of, which may include gentlemen's clubs, by the way, just so you know, may include places where people in truck stops, might include that, where a trucker is relaxing and they have, what do you call it? They got to stop. The government requires them to stop however many hours. What are they supposed to do? Sit in their truck the whole time? So they go in and they have these gaming machines, some that cost money, some that don't. Why are we against them? I don't know. What do you care if somebody wants to put their money in a slot machine? Who gives a rip? And what difference does it make to you, oh regulator? That kind of thing. And so the impetus of all of this for me is finally somebody did something about this deference, okay? And I wanted to share with you an alternative position. And this was actually written last year, okay? Because Chevron deference ended in June, I believe it was, is when the decision came out. June of 2024. Now, the law, when you make a major change like that, really takes a little while to work its way through the system, because cases regarding this type of thing will have been filed immediately afterwards. Somebody would say, well, now I'm going to get those a-holes because this is what they did to me. So this will give me a reason to fight ICE. This will give me a reason to fight the Department of Energy or whatever regulatory agency that you want to, that has stretched their authority for the last 40 years, and the Supreme Court now says it's wrong. And you can sue. And by the way, there's big money in it, because if you can prove the violation and you can prove that you get damages because of it under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, you can get damages if they've overreached and done something like that. You can get damages in federal court. Excuse me. And I forget how it attaches to it, but if you got a federal case, it's a federal agency, you can do it. Now, if a state agency has broken federal law, you can go after them too. It's hard to win. There are a lot of immunities that they get to log into, but these days it's lightening up. Now, I haven't been anti-government, but I've spent a fair amount of time when I was practicing law in suing the state, suing state actors, all during Chevron deference. With Chevron deference, where the court would defer. So if it came to court, if you sued somebody before, and you sued them before June of 2024, federal agency, and you sued them in federal court, and a term came up that the court was trying to consider, the court would say, and the attorney for the plaintiff would say, geez, it doesn't give them the authority to act. They don't have the authority to interpret or create this interpretation. The court, because of the Chevron doctrine, would say, well, these are professional regulators. They know what they're doing. We need to defer to that expert, that overpaid, fat, bloated pocketbook. And I don't mean fat in the physical form. I mean they got a big, fat pocketbook because they get to do whatever they want. We get to take those regulators down. And but previously, under the Chevron doctrine, the court would say, well, big, fat wallet regulator, you are the expert here. So we will defer to you. We won't interpret. We'll just say, well, they're the professionals and they know what the legislature meant. They do what they're going to do. Now, why? I disagree with that interpretation, always have. And so when Loper Bright came out, it's like, oh my God, are they fixing this? Because my strict construction Constitution guideline says there are three branches of government. Legislature creates the law, executive branch approves the law and carries it out as written. And if there's a dispute, what does the judicial branch do? They interpret what was meant. Or, more importantly, they say, you know what? Regulator, you can't do that because the legislature never gave you the power. But for 40 years, they were saying, well, you're the experts. You should know what Congress intended. I think that's a bullshit view. It was wrong then. It's wrong now. But I want to give you a different interpretation of that, written by, who is this guy? There's a what's this called? NRDC. Who are these people? I see the writer, but I'm trying to figure out what NRDC means. Natural Resources Defense Council, a charitable organization, I'm sure, certainly a lobbying organization. And so this was written by a contributor named Jeff Turrentine. And it was written in about June 28th of 2024, a little bit after, quite recent, after the Supreme Court ruled upon the Chevron doctrine. So I'm sharing this because of the opposing viewpoint, and as we go through, I'll stop when I'm not reading his words. But here's what he said. U.S. Supreme Court's ruling today in Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo dealt a severe blow to the ability of federal agencies to do their job. Yeah, I disagree with that opening statement in its totality, all of it. And then he continues, do their jobs by ending the 40-year-old precedent of Chevron deference. He loved deference because regulators get to regulate. Instead of, here's why, instead of deferring to the expertise of agencies on how to interpret ambiguous language in a law that pertains to their work, federal judges now have the power to decide what a law means for themselves. Oh my God, a judge has to do his job of interpreting the law. And it says, as a result, here's his thesis. This whole paragraph, when you write something, the thesis is the first paragraph, usually. And he says, as a result, despite not being accountable to the people, this is the big deal. They aren't accountable to the people, like regulators are, however, I ask the question. As a result, despite not being accountable to the people, judges can now expand their role into the realm of policy making. So judges are now creating policy according to his, in my view, skewed view. And here he says, in one fell swoop, he's quoting somebody else, in one fell swoop, the majority today gives itself exclusive power over every open issue, no matter how expertise-driven or policy-laden involved the meaning of regulatory law, wrote Justice Elena Kagan in her dissent from the ruling. She is all for deference to powerful regulators, but a powerful judge? No, that shouldn't exist, right? Now, I've things to say about that as well. And as if it did not have enough on its plate, she continued, by the way, Kagan, it's as if it did not have enough on its plate, the majority turns itself into the country's administrative czar. Well, what were you in the first place? It's your job, Ms. Kagan, or Justice Kagan. That's your job, to interpret the law. I say, the lane is the lane, and she's like, nah, we don't have a lane. We're supposed to sit up here with our thumbs up our asses doing nothing. And then when the legislature creates something and the president signs it, then we don't have to do anything. We don't have to interpret a word. That should be done by also an unelected bureaucrat. Where do they get their power? Because they took a job when they were 30 as a secretary in a regulatory agency and worked their way up through the ranks and are now what you say, an expert. Would they still be an expert if Grandpa got him the job in the 30 years prior, or does that have any bearing on it? And Grandpa still takes care of him, and now they're having lunches with lobbyists, and they've created all their power and consolidated over the years. Is that a problem to you, regulator lover? Oh, anyway, the article continues. The decision has profound consequences. I agree with that. Not only for the countries, here's what they're going to beat you up with, rule of law, but also for how agencies such as those protecting the public. Yeah, they're protecting the public, all right, against everything from pollution and contaminated food to workplace hazards and rising drug prices are able to function. Here's what you need to know. That is his opening salvo, right? The opening salvo is, gee, these unelected judges, these politically placed judges are going to be interpreting the law. Well, that's what they do. That's what the founders put them in place to do, for God's sake. But he's in the defense of course, he's looking for the national resource or whatever it was called, whatever that charitable organization is. On resources, he's defending, these natural resources, right? He's defending the planet, in his view. He's defending the planet. So a fellow defending the planet regulator should be able to interpret, which is exactly what they did in Chevron so long ago. They interpreted, I went through that with you a few days ago, okay? So he is against and he said the next section of it is balance of power. We're taught in school, and here's his alternative view to my view. Ready? We're taught in school about how the U.S. government's separation of powers, which I see as clearly being inside your own lane, is supposed to work, he says. Congress writes the laws, the executive branch carries them out, and the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, here's the difference, resolves argument about what the laws mean and evaluates whether they're being enforced properly. In reality, these powers overlap at times between the branches of government, and overall, the system relies on a certain degree of trust. Yeah, you got to trust your regulator, and we don't. I do not trust the bureaucrat, and given the choice between trusting a career bureaucrat who does nothing but expand their own power and take additional power not granted to them by the legislature and the president and use it, they get to interpret it. The only way you can get it is to sue somebody, and then the judge is supposed to interpret the differences in that. That's how it's supposed to work. But this guy thinks regulators are the God's gift to the planet, which I disagree with. So, for instance, continuing with his article. For instance, as society, technology, and the economy have grown more complex, it's very detailed. How would this judge know anything, basically? So, too, has the task of governance, of being a bureaucrat. You know, he's about to tell you how wonderful it is. Because Congress is not equipped to micromanage day-to-day administration of the legislation that it passes. It must rely on federal agencies under the supervision of the president to carry out laws and policies according to their best good faith interpretations. Yeah, a regulator needs to interpret, not a judge. Disagree, friends and neighbors. Likewise, federal judges have a role in determining the meaning of Congress's laws in order to settle disputes. But the act of policy making has always belonged to the two elected branches. Okay, there's an element of truth to that. That's actually true. The policy making is between the two branches. So why should a regulator be allowed to create law? Where is it said in their grant of power, which the power only comes from the legislature, that they can take a particular term and interpret it this way? They can, because why would the legislature create a set definition for a set group of things and leave one definition or two definitions out? Why would they? They're supposed to be the experts. They can change the law at any time. They do it all the time. Why is the law not supposed to be firm in that regard? Why not? Why not? Did you see the people heckling the the president? I forgot about that part. That was entertaining too. He was being heckled and he had signs and somebody walked him out. Anyway, for instance, that's what the people in the East are east, to east of the ocean that separates us from Europe, and all the globalist people. At any rate, society and blah 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 blah. The policy making has always been there. Today, however, the Supreme Court seized for both. It took both of them itself, and lower court judges now have a policy-making role the Constitution did not intend for them to have. Now, that's a mistaken view. Disputes, determinations of what the legislature intended have always been with the courts. The court gets to determine that, right? And here it says, here's final deal. The court stripped many federal agencies tasked with protecting public health, public safety, and the environment. For him, that's the important one, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which got the first deal against Chevron in the first place, or was part of that, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, to name just two, of their own power to interpret the laws they carry out. They get to interpret the law. He even says it right here. They interpret. What is that? Instead, federal judges now get to call the shots. Federal judges are now calling the shots. No, the federal judges are telling the legislature to do its job and telling the executive branch to stay in your lane. That is what they call strict construction. I am a strict constructionist. I believe the Constitution had three sets of powers, and that interpretation has always been the realm of the judiciary. Do I always agree? Absolutely not. Do I agree with Chevron deference? Did I way back when? Absolutely not, because that doesn't put an unelected regulator in his lane. He is creating the law. He is interpreting the law and creating his own policy and law. Now, sometimes you could say at the behest of the President of the United States or of the state in that regard, but that's how it works, That's how the system is supposed to work, strictly. Then he goes into what is Chevron deference and how does it work? It's the latitude federal judges give agencies to interpret statutes they administer in a dispute. 40 years ago, Supreme Court articulated a two-part test. And this test is what I disagreed with all along. Judges examine the wording and context of a statute in question to see if congressional intent was clear. If it is, then the matter is settled. The agency is obliged to follow the letter of the law. What it comes down to is this: if Congress has left an agency with a policy choice, the agency should make it, not the court, is what they say. Okay, a policy choice? How do you know if they've given a policy choice? Why? Because, okay, so you can change it every time a change in power comes. They get to change the focus, right? Why is it? Why is it that when the Democrats take office, when Joe Biden took office, they opened the borders, opened them wide, because that was his policy choice, right? But if the law says you can't do that, and the law says you can't, why would a regulator, a friend of the I don't know, whichever lobbyist got him his job as the head of ICE, why would that guy get to change it and open all the doors and let it go and just say, well, it's my policy, we let people come in, which is exactly what they do, and they do it anyway, regardless of what. But by the time it works through to the level of the Supreme Court, the damage is already done anyway, one way or the other. And so either way, it's still a slow-working system. And but if a statutory language is ambiguous, if it has two or more reasonable interpretations, the court, if it's going to, must, under Chevron, must defer to the agency's choice in how to carry out the law. No, what the court is saying is you cannot be ambiguous. Why are we creating an ambiguous law, legislature? Create a law that, if anything, the interpretation by the judges is saying, freaking legislature, do your job. Say what you want. You make the choice. The president can sign it, and then these people have to do it. Okay? They have to engage in this. That's what they have to do. There isn't an agency choice. I didn't give the agent a choice unless I put it specifically in the statute that says if a person is trying to cross the border and they don't have a regular, a way to get in here. They don't have, you can't provide this or that or the other thing, or they've been rejected before, then they may not come in. Shall. They shall not be granted admission. If that's the law and you're opening the gate, then you're wrong. Why are we opening the gate? However, if the law said, the legislature created a law that said the guy at the border, he has the choice to allow you in or not to allow you in, and the guy at the border makes that choice right there. That is what they call deference, a choice, something to do. But if a new person comes in and says, open the gates, wait a minute, the law says we can't just open the gates. The judge says, you can't just open the gates, and there you have it. Anyway, I hope I've explained that well enough. So it was in 1984 that it was Chevron, USA, versus who? The Natural Resource Defense Council, the same one he's writing this article for. This jurisprudential doctrine underpinned U.S. administrative law ever since and has governed some of our most important protections, he calls it, involving pollution, food safety, and more. So if you want to know how the regulators became kings, go back to 1984 and look at the ruling in Chevron versus Natural Resource Defense Council when Chevron lost. And the court said the interpreter of the law is the regulator. That's what happened, okay? You can agree with it or disagree with it. I can appreciate his point of view. I disagree with it because I'm a strict constructionist, and strict constructionists would disagree with this, right? So a guy named David Doniger argued that Chevron case on behalf of NRDC, which at the time was trying to get the EPA to adequately enforce pollution controls at industrial facilities under the Clean Air Act. Well, he sure twisted that a little bit. The agency under President Reagan was more inclined to pursue industry-friendly deregulation than decreasing pollution. Citing statutory ambiguity, Reagan's EPA said, interpreted, the Clean Air Act said that the interpretation was surprisingly much more to the liking of polluters and industrial facility owners like Chevron. The court ultimately ruled in favor of the agency, and the precedent of Chevron deference was born. Remember me talking to you about this a week ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe? On Civic Outlaws podcast, which comes up on Fridays, and there I'm going to talk this week about some sunshine law requests we've done for alcohol, tobacco, and another article that I wrote on that. And so you want to talk about how rewards work? This is how rewards work. You get rewarded. Now, if I win some of this stuff that I'm doing, trust me, I want my reward. No, I'm kidding. But I want to get my position in D.C. running the planet like this guy did. This lawyer who helped win that case. Okay, he won that case because he convinced the Supreme Court, which, by the way, didn't really lean in the favor of the Reaganites then anyway. They were able to say, wait a minute, the agency should get to interpret that law. And remember what it was about. It was about whether a state could put its own twist on what the EPA was requiring, and whether an individual machine in a plant, for example, a large plant, whether an individual machine could be replaced and targeted, or if one is targeted, that shuts down the entire plant. It was along those lines. And so they had the discretion to either shut down the whole plant or address it toward a particular piece of equipment in the plant, and the court deferred to whatever the regulator chose. Incorrectly, in my humble opinion. But there you have it. It was overruled, and now that the case that overruled Chevron, Loper Bright v. Raimondo, pits the owners of a New England fishing company against the federal agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS. The Magnuson-Stevens Act set catch limits to prevent overfishing and required fishing boats to have a government-appointed inspector on board. You got to have them on board to monitor their compliance so you don't overfish. Fishing companies incur the cost of these monitors. So the fishing company has to pay to put a federal dude on the boat. In Loper Bright's case, they were paying $700 a day to have this federal dude sit on the boat with them. But the company argued that NMFS had no authority to force it to do so, to pay the $700. A district court disagreed, reasoning that Congress had left the question open for the agency to decide. So the agency gets to decide whether or not it can charge somebody it's regulating $700 a day. Why would the agency get to decide that? Why wouldn't the legislature say, hey, you put these guys in, it's the federal government. Why in the world are you taxed to pay for these guys? A separate tax. Taxes pay for the federal government. You a-holes. That's a Samism. That's not in the article. The company argued they didn't have any authority. Applying Chevron, in this case, down below in the lower court, the court deferred to NMFS's choice that the boat owners should pay. And the Federal Appeals Court affirmed that decision, also following Chevron. Now, if you can get the Supreme Court to listen to you, because they never listen, remember, they get submitted 1,100 cases a year, and they hear 50, 60. They don't hear any cases. They reject everything. Everything gets rejected. And they call it cert denied, certiorari denied. You send in all your stuff, costs you $10,000 to print a book. And I say this with a little bit of knowledge because I've done it myself. Then they reject the book and you got to pay for it again because it has a spelling error, a page is in the wrong spot. So you pay $10,000 again just to get it. And nobody reads it. Some clerk reads it and then they throw it out. They say, well, cert denied. Nobody's going to read it. The court doesn't have to do their job. So don't go thinking the Supreme Court is doing its job for real. They pick and choose which jobs they want to take. They don't want to be overworked, for God's sake. You can't do that. Holy crap, what if we had to hear 1,100 cases and actually decide them on the merits or looking at what was done below? We don't have to do that. We'll just have a clerk read it, say, the justices don't need to hear that, and move on. Okay, that's how I feel about it. So the plaintiffs ruled for the Supreme Court, and in May 2023, the court said it would hear that one. That was one of the 50 to 60 cases, right, that it chose to hear. So at the time in 1984 Chevron versus NRDC ruling, Doniger, the lawyer for NRDC, he noted it was widely perceived in legal political circles that judges in the lower courts were inappropriately crafting policy by deciding for themselves what certain laws meant. So he's saying at the time, because the first interpretation is going to be lower court judges, that court judges were interpreting instead of the administrator were interpreting. Okay. But the judges up above are saying judges down below have to do their jobs. They are supposed to interpret. They aren't supposed to defer to the legislature. So the Supreme Court got it right in this overturning of Chevron. This is absolutely correct from a strict constructionist type of guy. But people who want the government to rule the planet, those people know that the big power is in the middle levels of government, this eternal, lifelong, separate. They're not the middle class. They're not the upper class. They're not the lower class. They are the government bureaucrat class. And they all support each other. You want to know where the deep state resides? Check it out right there. It exists in the mid to higher level career bureaucrat who never leaves. If you want to put term limits in, put the term limits in for those a-holes. Get them out of office. That's what I say. So, but he says, the author of this book, who's writing on behalf of NRDC, who lost what they had for years, this interpretation of Chevron deference, and he calls it his next partial is, and this was written right after the Supreme Court made the ruling on Loper Bright, and he said it's a recipe for chaos, right? The old order, in and of itself is apolitical because Chevron swords cut both ways. An administration seeking to relax protections, such as Reagan, EPA in the Chevron case, agency heads won't like having their decisions overruled by judges with a different way of seeing things. For presidential administrations prioritizing climate action, curbing pollution, promoting environmental justice, according to him, and I say just taking power for themselves and telling you what you will do as a citizen or as a company under their strict rule, the ruling class of bureaucratic ruling class. Hey, you know what? We ought to call it that. A new class, BRC, bureaucrat ruling class, BRC. That's what it's called. For presidential administrations prioritizing these things, Chevron deference has helped allow environmental progress. Oh, yeah, because you can appoint some kid who's never had a job in his life, just out of college, and all he ever did was carry around a sign saying, no more oil. He don't know why. Somebody just told him run around with that sign. Well, now he can't figure out how to get a job. So where does he go? The regulator class. He gets in there. Then he says, hey, man, I was against these boats in college. Some guy paid me to be part of a protest, and so I'm against them now, too. And he's the guy interpreting your statutes over the next 30 years while he doesn't have to do anything? I disagree with the bureaucratic government employee class. Those are the people that I'm against, okay? I'm also against it. I want term limits on everybody, including in the courts, by the way. Anyway, Chevron deference detractors, me, argue that the doctrine gives agencies a rubber stamp to impose onerous restrictions and rules. Absolutely true. Welcome to my world against the alcohol tobacco control people who've done exactly that for years. But as noted by the Brennan Center for Justice, yeah, he calls them a nonpartisan law and policy institute. Yeah, pull this leg, it plays jingle bells, I swear. Federal agencies face legal challenges to the rule all the time and only prevail in about 70% of these challenges, even with the Chevron doctrine on their side. In other words, the regulator's powers, according to him, he says their powers are far from unchecked. That is an interesting take on the Chevron doctrine. I think it's important that an ordinary citizen understand this. And I don't mean anything negative when I say the word ordinary. I'm an ordinary citizen. You know, I believe that people need to understand what your government is supposed to be doing. Why did America get founded? Why? Friends and neighbors, why? Why were people running away? They were running away from what they called tyranny. And where did that tyranny come from? The government. And so when you hear all through the 80s, 90s, zeros, and tens, when, you know, hey, I'm a regulator, I'm with the government, I'm here to help, and you disliked it, they knew that they were in charge anyway. Why? Deference, people, deference. And guess what? The courts are loaded with the same type of people who loved that deference. So if you think Chevron doctrine necessarily changed it in the favor of the people who like strict construction like me, the law takes years. The 40 years that it took for deference, the first 5 to 10 were people fighting the fact they were saying the deference decision was wrong. What are you doing? Why are you deferring to that? We're strict constructionists, and there were a number of judges in lower courts who would rule that and then get overturned by cert denied at the Supreme Court. And so the law, especially the interpretation of the law, takes a long time to work its way through the system until 40 years later, the court realizes, oh my God, that was a mistake. And why did our founders make it this way? They did it this way in the hope and the prayer that this country would be able to withstand such governmental upheavals and the evils of government. They knew at the time when they were founding this country in order to form a more perfect union. They didn't say perfect union because it's not. It's far from it. And so the only way it works is you have these upheavals from time to time. Someday, who knows how long from now, it'll go back the other way. That is the way that pendulums work. They go one direction and then right back in the other direction. That's where they go. That's what they do. Right now, the regulator has taken a hit. The career bureaucrat, and I'm not against administrators, I'm against bureaucrats. You want to be a government administrator and do your job the way you're supposed to, not interpreting things, not expanding your own, I make that judgment. I'm in charge. No, you want to be in charge, go make your own company. Otherwise, all we're doing is the legislator and your boss who signed it, even if he isn't the current boss, say different governor, different president, the law is the same. I've always objected to presidents coming into office. I was against it when Trump did it. I was against it when Obama did it. And you've watched it. In fact, I used to have a, I'm going to try to look for it if I can do two things at once. There used to be a chart that I read. I'm going to try to find it real quick because I think, there it is, right there. Yep, I've done the search before. Number of executive orders put out by each president, okay? And there's a site called, there's the American Presidency Project, which has an EDU ending, and it's the table that is presented that shows the executive orders issued by president. The president has been expanding his own power. and telling his agencies what they are going to do. And I've been against this all the way on these executive orders. So I think there's an archive that shows how many. Yep, here it is. Executive orders, and then the total average per year. And it's cool. It's at presidency.ucsb. What is that? What university is this? It's called the American Presidency Project. Oh, here it is. UC Santa Barbara. So that's what it is. ucsb.edu. Statistics is where I'm getting this information. And it says, click for more information about Trump's projects. A lot of people are against, Trump and against it all the way down. But it's listed by all the way down. And I'm going to pick a few for you from the first presidents. Let's do Washington issued 8 total orders, an average of 1 per every year that he served. John Adams, 1. Thomas Jefferson, 4. James Madison, 1. James Monroe, 1. John Quincy Adams, 3. Andrew Jackson, 12. Van Buren, 10. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but those are the starters of the country. Let's go to the middle sets. Let's go when it started to become a something more prevalent. So up until the years of Grover Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland again, McKinley, and Teddy Roosevelt. Before Roosevelt, the largest number was 217 by Ulysses Grant. Okay, and then, but he was the largest. And then came Theodore Roosevelt, 1,081. William Taft, 724. Woodrow Wilson, 1,803. These are people that are understanding their power. Then came Franklin D. Roosevelt, 3,726. Harry Truman, 907. Dwight Eisenhower, 484. John Kennedy, 214. And they went back down. People didn't, people bitched about this. They didn't like it when presidents were doing these things. Now we're going to get back to, let's start with Carter. Carter, 320. Reagan, 381. George Bush, 166. William Clinton, 364. George Bush, 291. Barack Obama, 276. Donald Trump, first time, 220. Joe Biden, 162. And Donald Trump, so far, 243. And he's only been in office a year. So he is averaging 225 a year is what he's averaging. So trust me, Trump is taking it back to the levels of presidents who made large changes like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 3,726. But people haven't used them all that much. But these 250, I think it's too many. I don't like it. I think those rules shouldn't... The law shouldn't change that way with the stroke of a pen. If it's a policy issue, fine. And a lot of them are policy issues, but a lot of them are just total changes, of what we're going to do with these executive orders. So you can see the rise and fall of that sort of order. Okay, well, we have all of that, and then we have Trump's use of it and the Chevron doctrine. So going from that and turning it a little bit locally, we have Missouri statute 536.140. And Chevron deference basically just said, we let the agency interpret, and if there's anything that is vague, then the agency can fill in the blanks basically as it sees fit. And then if they overstep, geez, you can always sue them. If you say it's an overstep, you can sue them. And that just takes a while, So these people can sue and they can get what's coming. But if you have Chevron deference, they're never going to get anywhere because the court will have to say, well, they were just doing their job, friends and neighbors. They were just doing their job and they weren't deferring. They weren't creating law. They were just interpreting it on their own, and they're professional bureaucrats. Maybe they should be allowed, but they're not, according to strict constructionists, allowed to do so. That's me. Okay? I'm a strict constructionist. So, and in Missouri, the likelihood of being a strict constructionist is even greater, especially since soon thereafter, within a year, the Missouri statutes changed. 536.140, which is all about a court reviewing a decision made by an administrative official, administrative branch, executive branch, when the court, when a citizen or anybody else disputes a decision made by an agency, they had the right to sue before under 530.140 ever since 2005. That's been a law that says here's how. That's the first time the legislature jumped in and said we think courts can interpret disputes between the law and the citizen, or between the statute and the citizen, between the regulator and the citizen regarding decisions made by an administrator, and here's how you do it. Or the interpretation of a statute, whether it's constitutional or not, here's how it's done. And 536.140 has been around since 2005, and it gave instructions to the court on how it would interpret disputes between citizens and regulators. Okay? And it's never been touched until 2025. In 2025, it was changed to say that, and post Chevron, by the way, Jesus, because what we did was, even then, Missouri followed the same sort of deference that, a regulator's a regulator, and there are professional regulators here too. Why don't we let them evaluate the law and interpret it? So they let that go. However, 2025, legislature approved, signed into law by the governor, a change, an amendment to 536.140 of the revived statute of the state of Missouri. And that change was quite harsh, at least for regulators, okay? Regulators aren't going to like this at all, and I'm sure they don't, because they still, under this important change, now it says, here's the subparagraph 3 says, in actions brought by or against a state agency, a regulator, after applying all customary tools of interpretation. This is, after you check it all out, court, after you review the case as outlined above in paragraphs 1 and 2, you come to paragraph 3, and this is how you have to interpret it. You interpret it. This is the legislature seizing back its own power, okay? Seizing back its ability to create law, not the regulator's choice to interpret it how they see fit. Nope, that doesn't exist anymore in Missouri, because it says, after applying all customary tools of interpretation, the court or hearing officer shall, means they must, decide any remaining doubt, if there's any, in favor of a reasonable interpretation that limits agency power, limits the power of the regulator. Limit that person, stop them from overreaching, and maximizes individual liberty. That's the sentence. This is the club that we get to beat up regulators with in Missouri in the court. And those cases are weaving their way through the court system, just like they're doing nationally over the era of Chevron deference ending. People who don't like heavy-duty regulators, or some kid, with pink hair dictating, what environmental law is going to be. Because he couldn't get a real job, he went and took the easy job of regulating, the environment. This is what I want to do. I don't want to carry flags anymore. I want to work at the EPA, because we're going to take down Chevron. We're going to take down these people that want to do something. And by the way, I don't mean to get too politically about that. Agencies have their jobs, but the job is what the legislature gives you. And the legislature, if you're a regulator, by God, you better have read your statute that applies to you. I'm afraid a lot of these people haven't read it. Yeah, certainly in the ATC, they're lacking it. Alcohol, tobacco control in Missouri, they haven't read their statute, 531, or I'm sorry, not 531, 311. What am I talking about? 311 or 407. 311 regarding alcohol, 407 talking tobacco. That's the only power you have is given to you in those two statutes. That's it. You don't get to go into other statutes and yank power out of there. You don't get to do that. That's not allowed. And nobody gave you that power. Nobody. You didn't get that power from the Missouri legislature. So quit taking it. Quit stretching it into where you want it to be. So that, I believe, is important to know. And I'm going to share, like I told you, I'm going to share my article with you. We got a response to, oops, I knocked something down. Hold on. Gerald will get mad at me if I make a mess in his lovely studio. And actually, he won't. He's always real good to me. But we got an answer to the sunshine request that we sent, and it is, geez, I'm going to share it in its entirety on Friday for sure. These people, they're out of control, is what I say. On the alcohol, tobacco control, people are out of control. And we shared an article with all the state reps and the Senate yesterday that I wrote that I'm going to share on Friday on our Civic Outlaws program. I've offered, and that offer still exists, if one of the regulators from ATC, one of the career regulators that gets to interpret their stuff, or perhaps a lawyer representing them, I don't care. Call and convince me how wrong I am. Let's walk through it, and you tell me why I am wrong. Tell me. I'm happy to learn. Come to on the show. Call in 573-746-8020. Call in. Talk to me. Explain to me why I'm wrong. I'm happy to listen to that. I'm happy to be educated. And I will let you have your say and tell me why, tell the listening audience why I am wrong. I'm happy to do that. I don't care. I think it's great. I admire people who stand up for what they believe. And if you believe the regulator is the answer to all of life's problems, come on and tell me why. Even if you're a regulator, especially if you're a regulator. But be prepared to say where you derive your power from, how you use that power, and most importantly, where your discretion ends. What are the discretionary choices you make every single day? What are they? And if you go to civicoutlaws.com and you see some of the things that we bitch about or that we are researching, it's stuff like the flock camera. You know, I'm very eager to do some sunshine requesting, some freedom of information requesting of these decisions. Want to talk about regulation and stealing authority that's not yours. Flock cameras. Let's talk about that. I follow the case in Virginia, Richmond, that's going on against the Richmond Police Department. And I'm interested in the law that creates. I think there ought to be somebody who engages in that exact same thing in central Missouri. I'm against these cameras. I'm against law enforcement being able to use those cameras willy-nilly, and some police officer's girlfriend, is cheating on him. He gets to follow her and her boyfriend using a flock camera system by sending something without a warrant. That's a warrantless search. I'm against, I could lecture now on ATC. I've got article number 3 coming out, and that article, which I've already shared with not me, but our group has shared with every state rep, every senator. The article is called "When a Licensing Agency Becomes a Clandestine Police Department." I'm shocked by some of the stuff that they have done. I'm shocked that they carry weapons. I am totally shocked by that. And if somebody could come on, how about some legislator come on and explain to me why they carry weapons? How about that? How about some legislator come on here and tell me, they get the discretion to decide who carries a weapon. The director or the supervisor of alcohol, tobacco, the supervisor gets to determine whether an officer carries in a weapon to a liquor establishment. Check it out. I had a bar. I owned 3 bars in my life. I've owned 3 bars. Had 3 liquor licenses, way back when. And what they did when they checked me out is they say, you got to go through. You can't have a felony. You can't have this, and getting the license is fairly easy, right? You get the license and you move on. You put it in place. Then some guy comes and inspects you. From time to time, they send out Regulator Man, and Regulator Man comes to your place. You hope he's not a bureaucrat. You hope he's an administrator. Why in the world would I want Regulator Man with a gun on his hip and a badge in his pocket pretending to be a policeman? What in the world is that all about? Alcohol and tobacco control. Why in the world are they armed? What are you after? Coming into my bar armed. It makes no sense. I wouldn't allow anybody else in carrying a weapon. Why in the world are you coming in? If you want to be a policeman, go join the police force. You're a licensing person. That's it. You're an administrator. And I don't mean that bad. We need administrators too. Do your job. Don't go pretending to be a police department. And so these guys have had police department monikers everywhere. They're carrying badges. They're doing undercover at places. They're going in undercover. We got to go in undercover. And then worse, they have a document that's called the Alcohol Tobacco Control Police Department. It's an investigative report. It's just like your municipal police department. Some guy, I went in undercover to this, I don't know, to whatever law he's trying to get. I went undercover and met with the drug kingpin, here. Is it because it's more prevalent to have the drug kingpin in a place with a liquor license? That's nonsense. A bar's a bar. The fact is, the mafia is not hanging out in the bar. You want to attack the mafia? Come to me and say, I'm going to have an unlicensed, a police officer, a policeman is going to be here undercover, and he's going to have a weapon. Me as the bar owner, maybe I need to know that, or not. But that person that's coming in undercover is under a different law if he's a policeman. If he's with the FBI, if that's a law enforcement agency, right? If he's with the highway patrol, he's a policeman, and he has the authority to arrest people for crime. Alcohol, tobacco control does not have that authority. They don't have it. They've not been granted that. Why in the world are they carrying weapons into liquor establishments? BS. I call bullshit. That's nonsense. Anyway, that article I shall share with you in its entirety on Friday. And that's article number 3 in the series. Meantime, Civic Outlaws has sent out some requests. And it's pretty funny what we got back. We asked for documents that show there's a form, and I didn't bring my glasses. Oh, yes, I did. They're right here. I have my glasses. Hang on. As we wind down today's show, here's what I'll tell you. There is a document called, and it's an inspection document put out to you. It's called the Routine Inspection Report, Alcohol and Tobacco Premises. Okay? And that form is called Missouri 812 MO 812-0569. And so we sent a sunshine request to get. My curiosity was how this form has changed. Where did the form come from? Number one. Number two, how has it changed over the years? Where's it gone? And what they sent me is really kind of what they sent us, really. It's kind of a joke. Okay, it's nonsense. What they've answered, so they sent me 3 forms scribbled up. They got lines drawn on them, and it's not blank forms. They've got check marks, and they've drawn on them. They've edited them with pen afterward. One of them is dated 10 of 22, appears to be the last one. That one's clean. That one they could provide me with nothing on it, right? That's just the clean form. Then they provided 2 prior versions, okay? One dated March of 2021, so they changed it in March of 2021, because before that they had one dated with a change of March of 17. They didn't provide a blank form prior to that. So now we've had to send out and ask a question. Does that mean that this form didn't exist before 2017? That this was there no, because we asked for predecessor forms. If there's another form that is, the predecessor to this form that they were using for inspections, we've asked for clarification and asked for a blank form, because on one of these, they talk about topics discussed, and the topics weren't even the correct topic. They had to line them out and write in the proper regulation to the side of it. And the other one, they scribbled out all the numbers on the left that outline the topic numbers, and then on the bottom they put extra stuff in there, and maybe they had changed the statute, but the order's wrong, or whatever. Maybe that's when they discovered they had to change it. So we don't know whether it's just somebody changed the document all wrong, or whether... We don't know. So we're asking again. We're sending it to us. Plus, they sent us a document saying the other documents we requested all the forms that were executed, just the form, not the investigative report, just the form is all we want, going back to January of 2024. So assumedly, they have a system that they can get on the system and say, okay, we've done in 2024, we did 500 inspections, okay? In 2025, we did 500 inspections statewide. 2026, we've done so many inspections statewide. And each one of those has a document on the very top of it, which is this inspection form. The inspection form is very generic. It doesn't say anything except the place and the address and then going through the form. We said, give us the one that has the check marks for the ones that are important to us, which were improper acts, which they created themselves, and lewdness, which they also created themselves. And so we don't know what, we want to find out who's been inspected for these things. Assumedly, it was everybody. So all you really got to do, if everybody's got this form, is you just need to go and find the ones that are check marked with a box 14 or 15 as a check that you either discussed it or somebody, was investigated for that. They say, and their initial response was, well, that's going to take us a year and a month or something like that. It's going to take us a year. It's going to cost you $8,000. And we want it only in electronic format. So pay us $8,000 and we'll go look for these forms you want. How is that government openness? It's nonsense. They say it's going to take them 3 minutes per form to look at it and see whether it's checked. Well, you know what? I don't even care if you look at it. Send every single one of them. Send them all from January 1, 2024 until now. Or say, let's go back each quarter. How about, would it be okay? Somebody call me. Somebody call us and talk about it and go, well, we can't do that, or it's going to cost you too much money. Explain why. They say, no, it's going to take this. And that's assuming we spend, if it's 3 minutes per form and we put 5 hours a week in, you can have an answer in a year plus, and it's going to cost you $8,000 for an electronic form. If you want to go check them out, that's on you. That's not on me. Just give me all the forms. It's public information, is it not? This is what they're doing is trying to stop us from getting these forms. That's what they're doing. And so if a legislature wants to get involved in that, which I think they should, that's where we should go. Oops, I've talked all the way up to the show. So listen on Friday, and we're going to continue with this. I find it entertaining. Of course, I'm living it. But this is Samuel Trapp. You are listening to International Flavor. And I kind of eased into the civic outlaws quite a bit today and yesterday. Follow us every day. Listen to damradio.com/live in all of your spare time. And me specifically, go to internationalflavor.com, listen to all the back shows. And I very much appreciate you being here.